Over the last month or so, I've been exploring a channel called Psych, run by a former actor turned psychologist, Dr. Ryan Taraban, somehow, someway, with videos titled Men Need Friends, a PhD in Men, and responding to my female critics. We always find a way to circle back to blaming women for the behavior of men, or the consequences men face when they are not who they should have been to other people. If you feel like you are so entitled to the time of others, in this case specifically women, to the point where you are basically just bothering them, and then end up alone and lonely, that's kind of your fault. But that is something that is never addressed by Orion. If you do a very quick Google search on him and end up on Reddit, you're going to find very quickly that people have been calling him the educated Andrew Tate, the Andrew Tate that went to college. He got a degree, and now he uses this overconfident, unnecessary vocabulary to make himself seem a lot smarter than he is. I understand looking at someone who may be in a similar life situation as you, seeing them get a degree and going, oh, they're probably smart, and wanting to take advice from them. However, I probably wouldn't take too much relationship advice or advice on women from someone who seems to be alone. Today's video is called Creating a Monster, How Men Ruin Relationships. And for a second, after I opened it, I thought, oh, we are teaching men how to take accountability. This is good, right? We were teaching men not to be complacent in their relationships. We were teaching men not to be the person that Paige Turner just talked about in her viral TikTok video, where she talked about how after having 4 kids, she asked her husband to take the trash out and unload the dishwasher. And he did for a little while, and then he forgot. And she considered divorce because even after having 4 of his kids, he just refused to respect her time. Oh, Max, but he has a full-time job. So did she. So that's the very first thing that came to my mind. We are teaching men how to take accountability for their actions, hopefully before those actions turn into habit. But then I remembered who we're talking about. And I'm going to leave this in case I'm wrong. But it's just going to be another way to blame women, I think. It makes me feel like he's going to say something like men ruin relationships by allowing women to have too much freedom, or by letting them have bad habits, or not breaking them down. Stuff like that. But hopefully I'm wrong, and we'll figure that out together.
I'm Dr. Orion Taraban, and this is Psych, Better Living Through Psychology. And the topic of today's short talk is creating a monster. Over the duration of my career, I've done a lot of consultations with a lot of different men, and many have spoken to me about their unsatisfactory marriages and relationships.
He says that often, and it's also in his description, that he's done consultations with thousands of men, which I think is fine. I definitely am not going to tell men not to go to therapy. However, I think you're doing yourself a disservice as him and as the people he's seeing if you're just a bunch of men in a room wondering how people of a different gender feel without ever consulting them. And that may be one of the problems.
And this has allowed me to discover points of convergence throughout most of their cases. And I want to share some of my findings with you today. First and foremost, I've discovered that bad relationships are almost always based on poor selection. I cannot say this enough. You can't have any relationship with anyone. There's a whole chapter of my book on this concept alone. You can only have certain kinds of relationships with certain kinds of people.
I'm going to hope that he explains that a lot more before we get into talking about it. I have an idea of what he wants to say, and I already think it's dumb. He's probably not going to get into the conversation that he has about how men should be friends with men, and somehow I think he means only with men. The thing about this is you have to know who his audience is, and it is unfortunately men who are... I'm looking for a word that doesn't have the negative connotation that desperate carries with it, but that's what it is. I don't think there's anything wrong in being desperate and looking for answers, and looking at someone who is seemingly well educated to guide you. I don't think there's anything wrong with that inherently, but when your audience consists of men who are desperate, that are unfortunately looking for, I struggle to say love, but a relationship. And so it's really, really hard to drive into them that, no, you can't have that relationship with everyone. Not because it's impossible, but because you probably want different things than people do. You shouldn't settle for a relationship with someone just because you want a relationship and that person happens to be available. That's two-sided, and his audience is men, so he's going to direct that at men, and I don't think that's a problem. But in finding your relationships, whatever it is that you're looking for that hopefully lasts for the rest of your life, I hope that you find them with people who want you as much as you want them and who are willing to love you in the way that you want to be loved. And I think that's all that is. And that's so much easier said than done, right? Like, I've definitely been in relationships way too long with people that I didn't need to be, that I had no business being with, who wanted entirely different things. And at that moment, maybe I just didn't want to be alone, and maybe they didn't either. And so we settled for each other. But I don't know if that's the conversation we're about to have.
For whatever reason, certain people are not temperamentally or emotionally or psychologically able to have stable, peaceful, loving, long term relationships. And it's not your job to figure out why or how to fix them so you can get what you want from them. If you insist that you should be able to have the relationship you want with the person you want to have it with, independent of whether or not that person can emotionally or psychologically do so, then, my friend, you're on the path of pain.
I am unfortunately carrying into this video the context of knowing how he speaks about women. And so when he says people, I know that he means he's talking to a straight male audience and therefore people are women. And so he's saying in a very calm, roundabout way, you cannot have relationships with women who are temperamental. You can't fix them. Don't try to. They're just crazy, bro. And I'm trying not to just like stick words in his mouth because if this video were a standalone video, I probably wouldn't make that connection. But when in every video he has found a way to make it about how women suck, I'm coming into this video with like, okay, what's he gonna say about women now? Has anyone else done videos on this man? Because I have not found any. I just went like a 20-minute rabbit hole of like people talking about him on Reddit and finding videos that he's on YouTube, and it seems like people who want his advice to be good say just that. This guy's so smart and he speaks so well, but they very rarely mention any specific advice. And then the opposite is true. When people want to criticize him, they point out things that he does say. And that's all that is. Like, I will agree that he sounds smart, but sounding smart and being practical in your advice are completely different things. If you take your advice based on whether or not somebody sounds smart, you're going to miss out on a ton of life. You're also going to take advice from people who spent a lot of time figuring out how to talk and what to talk about, but not necessarily whether or not what they say is actually accurate. So you can spend your time learning about the psychology of something, how to put stories together, how to talk to people, how to be. Or you could do the thing that is probably much harder for a lot of people and just go do it. I'm a big believer in learning from experience, even if the first 100 times don't go well. If you want to learn how to talk to women, go talk to women. Talk to your friends who are women. Maybe don't sit around and listen to Dr. Terabin or even me. I cannot tell you the amount of times I've had guy friends of mine come to me and say, hey, I'm talking to this woman on Tinder. What do I say? And I go, dude, what? Just talk to her. Find something you have in common with them. A friend of mine showed me a woman on Hinge and her bio said something like, I like Minecraft and I have high expectations. Don't let me down. And I was like, okay, right. I would never let you down. Like the nether portal in Minecraft. That's it. It's the only time I'm not like, dude, just figure it out. You'll be fine. You'll be all right. It's hard and it sucks and it's scary, but you're going to get a lot more out of it than listening to people online tell you about it's too scary. Don't do it. Anyway, sorry, I got distracted.
It won't work out for you, but you'll only figure out that I'm right after years of conflict, heartache, and despair. No bueno. In any case, it's poor selection that is almost always to blame.
What's funny to me is that he wrote this script, which is not a problem, but in his script he wrote, no bueno. No bueno. Que dije, toda tu vida, si nada más quieres mujer y mujer y mujer y no te quieren a ti, no va a ser bueno. Yo soy el doctor. No bueno.
But that doesn't really help someone who's already in a difficult relationship now, does it? He can't turn back the clock and pick someone else. And even if he could, would he? In any case, I'm going to spend the...
Okay, so you know how the whole beginning where I was like, he hasn't said any pronouns, but I'm assuming he's talking about women and two men?
Pick someone else. And even if he could, would he?
And even if he could, would he? So that's just a confirmation. Okay, his audience is primarily straight men. He wants to talk to them. Should there be a space for that? Yeah, absolutely. There's absolutely nothing wrong with providing psychiatry therapy to primarily straight men. Should it be done by villainizing women? No. What? Like, how does that make sense to anyone? The way to fix men being lonely is not to make women their enemy. You shouldn't be lonely because otherwise you'd be surrounded by people that you hate. You want to hang out with women, bro? Name one person in a relationship with a woman who's happy. No bueno. And that's just like so stupid. At least when Harrison Butker went on his like whole rant about how women need to stay in the kitchen, he was like, yeah, my wife made my life way easier. Like he at least had one nice thing to say about his wife. Dr. Terabin is like, dude, all women are problems, bro. But you kind of have to be with them anyway. So let's figure out how to make it not suck. First off, spend all of your time hanging out with men. Second, you got to find one that doesn't talk. And if you found one, you're married, she talks. Let's figure out how to fix that.
In any case, I'm going to spend the rest of today discussing the second most prevalent factor common to unsatisfactory relationships. After listening to the arguments and stalemates of hundreds of men, it has become clear to me that a lot of these men were complicit in creating the dynamics of which they complained.
So that is the point of the video. I was so looking forward to it being entirely different than what I think it's going to be. I was so looking forward to a video being like, hey, is your wife not loving you enough? Perhaps you didn't love her enough and now you both kind of grew complacent. Did you guys decide that you were going to work 60 hours a week and she was going to take care of the housework, and now you both do that, but you don't feel like she's doing enough, even though that's something you guys decided together? Did you do a bad job of putting an effort into planning activities for you both, and now she also doesn't plan activities for you, and now you're just kind of home alone together in silence? Might have been your fault. Let's fix that. But I remembered who we're talking about, and it's just not going to be that.
Almost always did this unconsciously and unintentionally, but they did it nonetheless. I call this process creating a monster. In my experience, most monsters aren't born, they're created.
Also that, like, I'm really, really hoping he doesn't just flat out say the women are the monsters. You made her like this. You let her become this monster.
Let me explain what this looks like using a very obvious example. Have you ever seen a little girl having a temper tantrum in a store because her father wouldn't buy her a toy?
I've seen little boys do the same thing.
Chances are you've seen this happen. If not, it's fairly easy to imagine. Girl says she wants the toy. Father says no. Her eyes start welling up with tears. Girl says she wants the toy. Father says no. The child starts crying. Girl says she wants the toy. Father says no. The child flops down on the floor. Father says no, and now the girl is kicking and screaming. Father says no, and the kid yells, "I hate you." Father says no, and the girl threatens to call CPS and report him for child abuse. Father says no, and the kid starts to break and throw things. Father says no, and the girl starts hitting her own head against the floor.
I don't want to get into the conversation of parenting because that's not at all what we're talking about today, but 18 steps ago, you should have just taken the child outside, back into the car, and just sat there in silence, or found a way to talk about it, not allow them to start hitting themselves and throwing stuff around. Anyway, that doesn't matter at all. That's not part of this conversation.
The father has done a good job holding the line up until this point. However, if the stakes are now too high, if he suddenly caves and says, "Fuck it, fine, here's the goddamn toy, just stop it, okay?" then that parent would have created a monster that day. He certainly didn't mean to do that, but that's what he would do when he rewards the child for behaving like a monster.
Do I have to point to the sign? Is Terabin running the White House Twitter? Again, completely disregarding the point of the bad parenting there. Grown women, which I'm assuming and hoping that people like Dr. Terabin and his audience are pursuing, are not children. Children fight and flail and cry because they don't know how to process their emotions and they don't know how to express them. They're little bundles of energy, too tightly packed, and sometimes that comes out. Adult women, surprise, are generally capable of conversation. If you are in a situation where you're walking your adult girlfriend into Walgreens and your adult girlfriend asks you for something small, like a toy, a Three Musketeers, or an Almond Joy, if it's an Almond Joy, break up with her. I'm not explaining that one. You get it. If she or he or they want an Almond Joy, that relationship is not going to last. But if they ask for something small, and for whatever reason they expect you to pay for it, right? Whether that's a relationship you have, they didn't bring their card, or it's just convenient, like you're already grabbing other things, why are you saying no in the first place? If I'm somewhere with Lee, and Lee wants something, and she asks me to pay for it, it's probably a reasonable request. Or if we're getting food, we just pay for our food together, whether I pay for it or she does. I'm finding like a roundabout way to try and get to... I don't like that these men speak of relationships like they are a parent. You're not, you're a partner, you're a boyfriend, you're a husband, you're in this type of like manosphere place, someone who wants to be seen as a provider. Providers provide. And so if you're going to complain about the people you're providing for, complaining about expecting you to provide, then change who it is that you are in the dynamic. Stop looking for someone who wants a provider because you want to be a provider. It's weird to me to think of wanting to be in a relationship where I want to be parented or I want to be somebody's parent. I don't. I want someone to go through life with. And I make parts of her life easier and she makes parts of my life easier. And if we're somewhere and she wants one little thing and for some reason she asks me to pay for it or I'm already getting other things, sure. This is not an example of not having the money. This is an example of having power over someone. You are their parent, you get to say no for no reason. And sure, when you're the parent of a 4-year-old daughter and she wants a toy and you don't want to get it for her, you're allowed to say no, absolutely. But you're not a parent of a grown woman, which is again who I'm hoping you want to be in a relationship with. So why are you setting up scenarios that aren't real? Over the last week, just scrolling through my FYP, I've heard men complain about women having jobs, complain about women not having jobs. Oh, I established a role in our relationship where I'm the provider. That was fine until you asked me to provide. I'm trying to be very charitable in him comparing a relationship with a grown woman to being a father and having a child daughter. I'm trying to be very charitable and not calling him Charlie Johns.
He taught the child the location of his thumb screw, the emotional experience that he isn't willing or able to tolerate, and functionally instructed her in the behavioral protocol she needs to follow in order to get what she wants.
You're not going to tell me that teaching a child to throw tantrums for what they want makes them who they are for the rest of their lives. If that is such a problem, do not date people who throw tantrums. That is not something people are going to hide well if that's who they are. I don't throw tantrums. My partner doesn't throw tantrums. Toast generally doesn't. She will paw at me if she needs something. But like, brother, you're citing the worst experiences of people and trying to make them sound normal. And like they happen every day. There's no way your entire single male audience believes that this is what every relationship is like. Are there relationships like this? Yes, absolutely. There are relationships where one side throws a tantrum. One side. Maybe it's the example he gave where a woman's going to throw a tantrum over you not buying her something. Or more likely, it's going to be the example of men throwing tantrums because they're not getting sex. Oh, I just don't understand. I need this. Like, there are plenty of ways to make this about either side, and one of them is a lot worse than the other.
The father could scold the child with his mouth afterwards, tell her that good girls don't act like that. He could sit down and have a conversation with her about her behavior and get a commitment from her not to behave like that in the future. He could use threats of future punishment to dissuade her from doing that again. But none of that really matters. None of these interventions are really going to work because he reinforced the bad behavior. Contingencies trump communication. If you appreciate the insights on this channel, I would highly encourage you to get your hands on a copy.
He added music. He changed. He added music. He put on a tie. He combed his hair back to drop an ad for his book. That's so funny, dude.
Over the course of 432 pages, I delve deep into my economic model of relationships and explain the behavior of
432 pages of you just yapping, bro? That's nuts. Don't get me wrong, I sit here and I talk. Regardless of how long this video is, I've probably talked for at least 2 hours. But 400 pages? Here's over a page of me being anti-woman a day. That's nuts, dude. The amount of real-world experience you could have gone out and gotten in the time it took you to write that, you could have fixed yourself. You could have fixed yourself in your relationships.
Get and keep more of what you want in the sexual marketplace.
I don't like how he says sexual marketplace, like it's Facebook marketplace and you're just paying different prices for like different positions, or like how attractive people are. You know what I bought from Facebook marketplace? A Super Saiyan Goku Funko Pop in like 2020.
The next time that child wants something, what do you think is going to happen? Her behavior is going to escalate to headbanging, probably even faster than the first time, because the parent has taught her that that is how to turn my no into a yes.
How you are going to manage to tie that into a relationship between two grown adults is beyond me. You could also just do what my parents did to make me a quiet, submissive child who did not speak out of turn and just beat your kids. I don't recommend it, but they both just beat me. Actually, not only do I not recommend it, I'm pretty against it. Do not touch your children. I don't care if it's quote unquote discipline. Don't do that. That's an easy way to raise people who do not want anything to do with you. And now I flinch whenever Lee moves fast, dude. And she doesn't even move that fast. She has asthma.
All the child has to do is make things sufficiently uncomfortable for that parent, and he gives in. And the parent has taught the child that the most effective way of doing just that, in this case, is to hit your head against the floor. Over time, this transforms the child into a monster, which is obviously not good for the child, as no toy is worth such a metamorphosis, and it's certainly not good for the parent, who becomes increasingly angry, resentful, and hopeless. Giving in at that point was the worst possible thing that parent could have done.
The only way I can take this so far is this child became the people you're now trying to date, and this is why they're like that. Maybe it's not their fault, it's their dad's fault, but you are allowing it to happen instead of correcting it, which is so weird because now it feels like they're pets. Like, bad, bad girl, bad, bad, down. Okay, she's asleep. I thought she might. Like, I don't really scold her. I don't have a reason to, except she like yells at children whenever I walk her. Besides that, she's fine.
If the parent was honest with himself and understood that there was something his daughter could do that would cause him to fold, then it actually would have been better if the parent just got the kid the toy when her eyes started to well up. That way, not only would he not have had to deal with a temper tantrum at all, but he would have reinforced a much more manageable behavior as well. Basically, if you're going to give in, it's a good idea to give in as quickly as possible.
I feel like he is definitely doing people a disservice by not providing quicker, more actionable responses, like removing a child from that situation, which I think is what I've heard the most. Remove them from the situation, and not like in a threatening way, like I'm gonna turn this car around or we're going home without buying anything, but just like let them feel their feelings in a place where it isn't, one, going to physically hurt them, right? And two, not bothering other people.
On the other hand, the parent could have decided not to give in to the child no matter what. Not if she breaks stuff or calls CPS or screams until she loses her voice. Not if it takes hours and hours and hours of patience and self-control to hold the line. It doesn't matter. If he chose not to give in, no matter what, none of the bad behavior, though manifested, would have been reinforced. And this means that it would already have begun to disappear. Like, that kid might try those shenanigans a few more times, and it will likely be a very uncomfortable few more times for that parent. But if the parent holds firm, then the kid will eventually learn that shit doesn't work.
So here's the thing about who I was in public versus in private. As a child, I was 5, okay? I knew very quickly that my parents were more afraid of the way that other people saw them than anything else. My parents, my dad before he went to prison, and my mom just in general, were both very afraid of how the world perceived them. Who they were in private was entirely different than who they were in public because they didn't want to be seen as people who were aggressive, mean, bad parents. And so I knew that in private, I said nothing. I didn't make eye contact. I didn't talk to either of them. I was 4 or 5 years old, just head down, didn't say a word. But in public, I am pretty much who I am now. And so in the middle of a Big Lots in San Juan Capistrano, California, that Big Lots I don't think exists anymore, there's this rack of VHS tapes. And I really liked Power Rangers. And so I grab one. I ask my mom for it. And she says no in Spanish. So she says no. And so I stand there and I start crying. And in her version of this type of parenting, she leaves. But she full leaves. She leaves me there. And so I'm standing in the middle of Big Lots crying. And because I'm 4 and don't ever come home, I have all of the phone numbers I need memorized. They call her. She comes back embarrassed and buys the Power Rangers VHS for me. Did I do it again? No, because when I got home, I was severely beaten. But it worked. I got one thing out of it. Do I wish it was something bigger? Sure. Later on, it was a Nintendo 64.
And the child will eventually abandon that strategy in favor of some other kind of tactic or manipulation because it's not so stupid that it will continue to execute behaviors that don't work and have never worked. Do you understand? Dealing with bad behavior is...
It really just has to suck to live your life as someone who sees every type of relationship with other people as a full-time job. Every relationship with a woman is just so much work. Even your children. I'm not saying they aren't. They absolutely are. But it's a job this man does not enjoy. I know I wouldn't like raising children. I don't ever want any, but I would be really sad. And this does not apply to other people. It's not a judgment on other people. This is my personal feeling. I would be really sad if I saw my romantic relationship or my prior romantic relationships as nothing but work. Clock in, hate myself, clock out. I'm so lucky to get to spend the time with Lee that I do. And for the rest of my life, that's all I want. I'm glad that I did not become one of these people. And I hope that the people who have become these people find a way out of it.
Because it's not so stupid that it will continue to execute behaviors that don't work and have never worked. Do you understand? Dealing with bad behavior is kind of like the prisoner's dilemma. If you're eventually going to give in, you should give in as quickly as possible. On the other hand, if you're not going to give in, you shouldn't give in no matter what. The reason why so many people end up in suboptimal situations is because they think they won't give in, but they weren't honest with themselves with respect to how they would stand up to escalation.
My problem with this is we're 8 minutes in, and I don't know how this relates to a relationship between two adults. I have ideas, but I want to hear it from him.
Great. Now let's bring this over to adult relationships with women.
Okay.
Now, in most cases, the first issue is actually caused by the second. That is, the reason why so many women might be poor candidates for good relationships is not because they're like inherently broken, but because they were trained in monstrous behavior by other men in their lives.
I'm going to take that in the exact way that he said it. They were trained by other men, that if other men in relationships with these women have molded her into this person, why are we blaming the women? Why are we blaming the women? That's such a good segue into like, men, stop antagonizing women. Be nice to them. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, but that doesn't mean they don't deserve to be loved by someone else. That's all it is. You're so close, dude. You're so close.
Most likely, their fathers or their exes. You're seeing that behavior in your current relationship because it worked in their previous relationships.
Hot take, being a dad and being a partner are not the same thing and are not the same role.
And she's expecting that you won't be much different. Make sense? Now, don't think that the kind of behavior I just described is unique to dysregulated children. I have seen more than once with my own eyes grown women doing all of those things and more. The kind of shit that can happen in relationships behind closed doors is almost incomprehensible.
So that brings me all the way back to Paige Turner. Excuse the light mode, I'm signed out. She made a video talking about how she had to very gently parent her husband into taking out the trash because after having his fourth child, she says, hey, I feel like I'm running out of time. I have work. I have our 4 children. I just need you to do some of the chores. And her husband, very receptive, goes, what do I do? She goes, take out the trash, unload the dishwasher. That way, when I get up in the morning and grab our baby's bottle, it's ready. And he goes, yeah, I can do that. And for a little while, he does. And then she has to start reminding him, which at first is not that bad. A gentle reminder is fine. I forget things all the time. Until eventually, he just doesn't do it. And she gets up, and nothing's put away, and she has to take time out of her morning to do it before she feeds the children. And then she ends up being late for work because, surprise, she also has a full-time job. She calls him to go, hey, why didn't you do it? And he goes, sorry, I was running late for work. And she drops the line, wow, he doesn't see me. Because he was late for work and didn't do the thing he said he would, I am now late for work. There are 2 people in a relationship, both hopefully as equally involved. And such a common theme that I keep seeing is women being pushed to a breaking point by constantly having to remind, reassure, and ask for the bare minimum. And when that TikTok got posted on Twitter, weird, right? So many men blamed her for it. So many men were like, wow, you couldn't just take out the trash. Wow, and the time it took you to make this video, you could have just done those chores. But you have to be smart enough to understand that that's not the problem. First off, if a woman has 4 of your children, shut up, you owe her the world. Second, if you go out of your way to ask her how you can help, she gives you 2 chores that don't take very long, and you still can't do them, yeah, you've earned a little bit of criticism. And its response is like, wow, she's entitled. Wow, she doesn't even have a real job. Wow, he has to go out and work. She should just do all the chores and not complain about it. That are the reason why you're single, not because women expect too much, because you think the bare minimum is too much. I was going to make a video about her, but Film Cooper dropped his yesterday, and I don't want to feel like I'm copying someone. I might still anyway. So men, you are not ruining your relationship by allowing your partner to expect too much. You're ruining your relationship by allowing them to expect the bare minimum and still letting them down. I have my moments. I have my moments. There are so many times in my life where I wish I was a better partner, not only to Lee, but to people that I've been with before. I've felt so much guilt over the last year about the things that I'm so happily willing to do for Lee that I never thought to do for anyone before. You know how much that sucks? To think that you loved someone so much and then realize that you did not love them as much as you could have. It sucks for me, and it probably sucks a whole lot more for the women I was with.
In any case, it's quite possible that you have seen or will see behavior like this at some point. So the question men need to ask themselves is, how much am I willing to take? Of course, the most common thumbscrew in adult relationships is threatening to leave. Propose to me by the end of the year or we're done, kind of a thing.
Why is it proposal? Like, that's so unrealistic, dude. Women are asking for the bare minimum, and the example that you use is proposal. Chill. But also, that's a really good example of 2 people moving at different speeds. Hey, I would like to be at this part of life by the end of the year. I don't want to be. Cool. Let's find other people. Cool. Let's do that separately. That's fine. Over the last week, we've seen 2 examples of people who got married after 2 months and after 4 months, and both of those were initiated by the man. So create these hypotheticals all you want, and I guess we'll just keep finding examples of the opposite. I'm going to assume that in this situation, these people didn't just meet. Hey, we've been together 6 years. Have you thought about proposing? And that's an entirely different conversation. But if he gets specific, he's going to know that he's wrong. So also asking to be engaged by the end of a year and throwing a temper tantrum in the middle of a store because you didn't get a toy are 2 entirely different things. Like, being proposed to is not the grown-up version of getting a toy from the store, dude.
Many men give in at this point, but like the hypothetical father in the toy store, this is the very worst thing they could possibly do. All it does is make threatening the basis of the relationship more likely in the future. And
yeah, threaten me with engagement like you've done with all of your other boyfriends.
You can't have a stable, harmonious, long-term relationship with someone who threatens the basis of the relationship every time she doesn't get what she wants. It's just not possible, my dudes.
I agree with the sentiment. I don't agree with the example. I agree with the sentiment of you can't have a relationship. You can't have a stable relationship with someone who constantly threatens it, regardless of gender, right? Like, there's a lot of communication that has to happen there, and you're allowed to disagree. If every time you guys get into a disagreement, they go, why don't we just break up then? Then break up. Yeah, it's hard and it sucks, but do it. But I don't think the example of like engagement, a proposal, is one of those everyday fights. I really don't. I think maybe it might happen once, and definitely not in most relationships. I don't know. You tell me. I've never been threatened with like propose to me or I'm leaving. Have you? How did that work out? Did they end up marrying someone else? Did you end up marrying them?
But here's the kicker. She only does this because it works. And why does it work? Because you taught her that it works, my dude. In reality,
you gotta stop saying my dude. Dude, you're like 40.
That guy should have seen the ultimatum coming. Over a long enough timeline, it's almost inevitable. If that man were honest with himself and he understood that he wouldn't be able to emotionally tolerate losing that woman, then he shouldn't have waited for the ultimatum. By acting first, he not only avoids reinforcing monstrous behavior, but he also remains the leader of the relationship and the point of origin of his own decisions as well.
Sometimes I feel like I put too many of my own real life examples into these videos, and then I remember, oh, I'm just sitting here yapping. It's going to happen. I talked earlier this week about how from 16 to 25, I was never single, right? A few different people, whatever, however long those relationships were. I was probably never single for more than like a month, maybe 2 at one point. And in that time, and even up to now, I have never, never been in a relationship where the woman I was with threatened me with some sort of ultimatum. And I thought to myself, period, actually, at all. I've never been hit with any like, do this or that. I'm sure the one of like, oh, I don't want you being friends with this person is probably a lot more common than the engagement one. Never been hit with that. The closest I got was when me and my first college girlfriend broke up over the summer because I was spending the summer in Illinois. But it wasn't an ultimatum. Like, at no point was it like, stay or we're breaking up. It was just like, I'm leaving and so we're going to break up. All of this is to say, I don't think you are helping yourself or anyone else by creating the wildest, most unrealistic examples just because they sound like they might happen to someone. I think it could have been a much more productive conversation if the one example was a little girl throwing tantrum to the point of hurting herself and woman in a relationship asking to be engaged, otherwise they're breaking it off. Like, those are just one, you're not a parent to your girlfriend. You're not. And for those of you that are in that relationship because you both want it, you're probably not watching this video. Second, if someone is threatening you with marriage and you immediately go, ooh, I'm not really there. You're not really there. And you probably don't want to marry that person anyway. And the other person is either one, fed up with you for not wanting to marry them in like a timely manner, or rushing into things way too fast. And that's probably not a relationship you're going to be in anyway. Alternatively, you end up in this one that I saw last night that made me really sad. I have to narrate it for you because of the music playing, but remember the moment I asked the love of my life if we could have fireworks at our wedding. And he says, at our wedding, who says we're getting married? If we get married. I want to get married. If we get married, of course we can. Without going into her profile, just getting this random video on our FYP. We don't know how old either of them are, how long they've been together. But these people are in very different stages of their own relationship. And that isn't a reason to sit here and be like, oh, women expect too much. You can just break up. And it sucks and it's hard. And I hope you don't sink this feeling of, oh, if I break up with them, I may not find someone else. If you filter out so much of what this man says and how he says it, you can find sprinkles of like okay advice. It's 100% normal and good and okay to say, do not force yourself into relationships with people who want different things, people who act in a way that you don't agree with. In the same way that, like, I wouldn't want to be with someone who throws a temper tantrum in the middle of a store, I wouldn't want to be with someone who mistreats waiters. If a month into our relationship, Lee had said, hey, I want us to get married, I would have said yes, but that's my own red flag. I have many more. There are plenty normal and healthy ways to say, do not force yourself into a relationship with someone who has different wants and needs than you. That's okay. But to create an entire channel villainizing women aimed at straight men is nothing short of harmful. And it sucks that he sounds smart, and it sucks that if you dilute everything he says down to an idea, he might actually be right, because it gives him the basis of like, well, I'm just telling you how things work. But that's not how things work. But it's like being handed a coloring book where all of the hard, dark lines are already done and you just have to fill them in. And watching him fill in these already set ideas with the wrong colors and attempting to shade, but he just can't. And then blaming it on the coloring book or the crayons. In my head, he's using crayons. You want to waste your own time? I guess that's fine. But he's wasting the time of so many single men who are not going to realize that. And I'm going to get comments like I did on the last one that say something like, being in a relationship with a woman is a waste of time. And if you believe that's true, I don't know why you're watching his video anyway, because his video is about being in relationships. So if you think being in a relationship with a woman is a waste of time, why are you watching a video on being in a relationship with a woman? And more specifically, advice on how to develop and maintain that relationship. That just doesn't make sense to me.
By acting first, he not only avoids reinforcing monstrous behavior, but he also remains the leader of the relationship and the point of origin of his own decisions as well. On the other hand, if, for example, that man just doesn't want to marry that woman or doesn't want to marry, period, then he has to be willing to hold the line no matter what. And this includes the willingness to suffer the pain of losing any particular woman. Some women will leave, and in doing so, they kind of confirm your decision.
Okay. But that makes the point of women not being allowed to have wants. Because your default is, oh, I was right about them anyway. But they're also holding a line. If this woman in this situation wants to get married, like plenty of people do, right? Not just women. I also do. If she goes, hey, I want us to get married one day, and you go, nope. And she goes, I really, really want to get married. And you go, mm-mm. And she goes, I want to be with someone who wants to marry me. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not in a year or even 5, but someday. You go, not me. And then when she leaves, you go, I was right about her. All women, they just want me for my money. She had her own want, her own need that did not align with yours. And so she has decided to leave to go find it. And I don't see the problem there. What are you right about? Oh, women have their own autonomy. I was right. Okay? A relationship in this situation is two people coming together to build a life together. If what those people want out of life are two fundamental differences, they should find it with other people. That's not a problem. Your critique of this made up situation is, oh, I was right about her. She wanted something I wasn't going to give her. So instead of settling for me and the bare minimum, which I'm probably not going to do anyway, she went out and got what she wanted. Those dirty, dirty women. That makes sense to you?
As their behavior reveals that they love what they want more than they love you.
You did not love them enough to even consider what they want.
So why would you increase your commitment? On the other hand, some women will stay, and if you resolve this challenge successfully, they will learn not to threaten the basis of the relationship in the future because you've taught them that it doesn't work. And of course, in adult relationships, there is a third option. You, the man, can remove yourself from the relationship. And I don't mean threaten to remove, I mean just remove. You can just leave. And you can just leave at the first red flag without waiting for the bad behavior to turn into a battle of wills.
Is wanting to be married one day a red flag? If so, I'll add it to the list of my own. However, I agree, you can just leave. But you just said if they leave in that situation, you were right about them. It was a red flag. However, if you leave, what? They weren't right about you? They weren't good enough for you? They weren't one of your boys?
And you'll start to do this when you stop putting your desire for any particular woman ahead of your peace and your mission and your self-respect. So those are your 3 options, gentlemen. Either leave, concede as early as possible, or hold the line no matter what. Because if you're not honest with yourself and you mix up those strategies, you're going to have a monster on your hands. What do you think?
I'm going to drop a hot take here and say that relationships should not be this way. Relationships should be a little like you're fighting to make each other the most happiest, incredible versions of each other. If you only ever think of your partner or relationships in general in these like negative ways, in these like, oh, I'm giving up this, oh, I have to concede this, oh, I have to hold a line here even though it feels like work type of ways, it really doesn't sound like you want a relationship, and you probably just want someone to sleep with, which you could probably find. It's not the hardest thing to do. But again, if that's what you want, why are you watching videos from Dr. Ryan Terabin on building and maintaining relationships? Even though he's just a bunch of red flags, why are you clicking on those videos anyway if it's not what you want? If you're so convinced that you don't want to even have a woman in your life, why? Like, this is an actual question. I don't understand that. This is at the people who were in the comments last time going, no, he's right. Being in a relationship with a woman is a waste of time. I don't ever want to be in a relationship with a woman. That's cool. That has nothing to do with me or even him, right? If you so desperately believe that being in a relationship with a woman is a waste of time, I don't know why you clicked on a video of him giving advice on how to be in a relationship with a woman. I guess am I missing something there? Anyway, all of this was to say that if relationships are just transactional to you, if she is just wants and needs that you feel like it's a burden to cash, then maybe you don't want a relationship with that person. And I'm going to say that person because I figured that out late. I had relationships with people in my early 20s that I was just so convinced that I loved. And at the time I did. I loved them as hard as I possibly could. But for whatever reason, it's not in the way that I love now. And in the way that I think now and the wants that I have now. I've never been in a relationship where everything I do, I want to do next to the person I'm with until now. And everything I do, Anytime I do it, I think of doing it with her. And that's dope. I would like to keep this for the rest of my life. Not once have I thought about it in terms of like, what am I giving up to make her happy? And even then, that is a much more productive conversation than don't ever give in to the wants of your partner or give in immediately. Otherwise, you're going to turn them into a terrible person. Normally, I kind of get what he's trying to say. And I think I get the idea here. The issue is like, this felt like it really didn't need to be said. There was no part of this video where I was like, this is helping anyone or this is getting through to people. Like there was no understanding. It's just another way to villainize people. And that sucks. There's a comment here that says, as a father of 2 daughters, I experienced this a few times. At the first sign of that manipulation strategy, we would leave the store. I just want to say I don't think kids think that hard. Do you remember being a child? Do you remember intentionally thinking I'm going to manipulate my parents? No, you just have a lot of feelings and you don't know how to express them. That's normal. When I go back now and look at like the things I did as a kid, I can make the joke that, oh, I did this on purpose, but that's just like kids being kids, dude. Like I didn't sit in the middle of a Big Lots crying because I knew it would make my mom come back and buy something for me. I did that because that's how I felt in the moment. There's another comment that says never negotiate with terrorists. But why are we looking at 1 children and 2 women this way? Why don't we treat them like regular everyday people who have their own wants and needs? But I understand how there's an audience for it, how there's an audience for just wanting your own biases confirmed. And there's another comment here that says, I accidentally created a monster by being the nice guy, by going above and beyond at every turn. This weekend, she got dumped. There's a give and take to relationships. Whatever she wants from me, I have to be willing to give her. But the thing about relationships, right, is that they're not permanent. If she wants something from me that is too much every day of my life, I can't do that. And you're allowed to break up. You're allowed to find someone who wants differently from you, not less, chill, but differently. And that person is allowed to find someone who's willing to do what they want. It's like going out, right? I don't like leaving the house. I don't. Lee likes it a lot more than I do, although she also doesn't like it that much. Am I willing to leave the house as many times as she wants in order to appease her? Yes. Yes. And during those times when we're outside, I am so in love with just spending time with her. I would rather do it indoors. I would rather do it on her couch, but I'm happy to do it at Costco. Happy to do it at the park. Happy to do it anywhere as long as I am with her. There's that trade-off. But let's say she wanted to go to the club every day and she wanted me to go with her. I've never been to a club. I don't think I'd enjoy it. Maybe I'd go once or twice, but I couldn't handle it. And that's not a reason to be like, oh, this woman wants too much. She can find someone to do that with her. It's not me, and that's okay. You are not forced to stay with someone who has different wants and needs than you. You're allowed to have your own wants and needs too and find someone to fulfill that. There are times when it may be problematic, but those are specific conversations. And that's it. And if your wants and needs are so wild that you end up alone, that might be on you. If you want a trad wife who happens to also have a 6-figure income, take care of you and your 40 children, and you end up alone, that might be on your wants. I feel like I bounced off so many points and went too far into directions that had nothing to do with this video, but that's such an easy thing to do when every example is made up, and he's unfortunately speaking to people who either aren't in relationships or are in relationships they don't like. That's it. It sucks to see so many people have him as someone they go to. He sounds smart, and the very, very, very core of his ideas aren't that bad. You're allowed to have wants and needs, and so are they. But when you're allowed to have wants or needs, and they aren't, if they don't align with yours, that's a dumb idea. And it's even stupider to have made a whole video on it. I'm going to call it there. Thank you for spending time with me. Toast left. It's really hot in this room. So go to Costco for me. Let me know if you find anything cool. This is my favorite thing to do. You're my favorite people to do it with. And I hope I get to do it for a long time. Goodbye.